Frightening, to say the least. A Nutmeg trip report by N.A. Posted to Irwid.org October 1st, 2008. I heard about nutmeg through the grapevine, and I have to admit that I was curious to use it. It seemed that the worst side effects were just nausea and things like that, and it seemed relatively safe considering that it's something that's in almost everybody's spice rack. How could something that my mother puts in her pumpkin pie hurt me seriously? I decided to try it even though my only experience with anything mind-altering had involved alcohol. I took whole nutmegs and ground them up into a powder in a coffee grinder. I proceeded to have it with iced tea. I have tried nutmeg on 2 occasions before. The first time was a relatively small dose and it was fairly unremarkable, other than the fact that the nutmeg tasted horrible and I felt like I had to vomit whenever I put it in my mouth. I will admit that for a day or two afterwards I felt slower in thinking and I felt fairly calm and happy, but it wasn't anything to write home about. The second time is what changed my life. I took about 2 tablespoons on a Tuesday night at around 10 or 11 PM. This time, it seemed like I wasn't as nauseous when I ate the nutmeg this time, which was good. And at around 2 or 3 AM, I could feel my energy going up despite the fact that I had been awake for so very long. I'd woken up early in the morning. And I even proceeded to start a heated debate with my mother at about 3 AM. I felt warm all over. And I felt rather agitated and aggressive, yet very energetic. I did not want to go to bed, but I did. On Wednesday morning, I woke up after about 4 hours of sleep, got out of bed, and walked to my bathroom to take a shower as usual. My head felt a little heavy and I felt a little bit out of it, but I assumed that was because of the lack of sleep. I practically had forgotten that I'd taken the nutmeg the night before. I was in the shower for about 2 or 3 minutes when all of a sudden, my head started to feel very heavy. Everything around me started moving in slow motion, and although I was standing still, the room felt like it was shaking. I could hardly see, and it felt that a very bright light was being shone straight into my eyes, and my hearing started to diminish. Instead, it was replaced with a very loud static noise in my ear, like I was standing right next to a TV, with very bad reception. I don't remember much, but I do remember that I sat down in my shower for what felt like a few seconds. I'm not sure how long it actually was, but it was probably no longer than a minute. And then, I proceeded, despite my lack of senses and my extreme dizziness, to try to step out of my shower. I had one foot out of the shower when I just lost control and fell straight onto my bathroom floor. I was lucky that I didn't fall flat on my face and break my nose, bruise my face, etc. I later found out that I somehow got from my bathroom onto my bed and started screaming from my mother. I have no recollection of my supposed journey to my bed. My mom came and told me to calm down because I was slowly starting to panic. My skin was starting to get cold and clammy, and I was starting to sweat. What scared me the most was the fact that it was so difficult to breathe. I could literally feel my heart slowing down, and was probably taking only a few breaths a minute. I thought I was either having a heart attack or going into shock. Thankfully, neither of those things actually happened. After my mother threw water in my face, held my hand, and told me to calm down and not to panic, I started to feel better, and my breathing started becoming more normal, and after several spoonfuls of salt, my blood pressure was back to normal. I felt tired and fatigued, so I fell asleep. This was around 8 AM. While I was sleeping, several times I was half asleep, half awake, and during those times I could hear my phone ringing. From the sound of it, it sounded like I had 10 missed calls because I could hear my phone ringing over and over again, although when I actually looked, I only had 2 missed calls. Also, we had workers coming into our home that day, and I heard them ring the doorbell, although it sounded like they rang it about 10 times as well. I later realised that these were auditory hallucinations. It felt as if my head would record a sound such as the ringing of my doorbell or the ringing of my phone, and it would keep on playing it on repeat in my head. Anyways, I woke up at around 12:30 PM and had to use the restroom. I got out of bed and felt alright, so I proceeded to my bathroom, did my business, and as I was getting up from the commode, I started to hear the familiar static sound in my ears, and all of a sudden, the room got bright and faint in my eyes. I fainted again, and although I don't remember much, I do remember trying to get up, but I had no control over my muscles. It felt like they had a mind of their own, so whenever I tried to get up, my body would just fling itself in the opposite direction. I had totally lost control of my body. I called for my mother again, and she ran upstairs, and we yet again went through the same experience that I had gone through earlier that morning. Very slow breathing rate, drop of blood pressure, sweating, a sense of doom, etc. I will admit that this time it was not as bad, but probably because I was not as frightened. Unfortunately, this experience made me realise that I was unable to stand up or even sit up at all without passing out after about 30 seconds to 1 minute. It was as if the nutmeg had made my veins so loose that when I stood up, my brain just couldn't hold on to the blood that was there. For the whole day, I had to stay lying down, preferably with my eyes closed. And if I wanted to move, I had to crawl very slowly. I had to constantly remain horizontal. I couldn't bring my head up vertically, and I had to stop every few seconds to lay down and bring some of the blood back to my brain. During the day, my overall vision was acting as if I had drank heavily the night before, vision moving around and shaking despite actually standing still. Colours seemed brighter, and occasionally I would see odd shapes. I felt pretty out of it mentally. I had bad short-term memory, and I felt disconnected yet connected to everything around me. It was strange. Overall, I felt like I was in a dream of some sort. Some type of alternate reality. The feelings are kind of indescribable. I continued feeling fatigued and sleeping, and I could also tell that I was retaining water. Even though I was drinking very large amounts of water, with sugar, I urinated only twice that day. I also had stomach cramps and various pains in my lower abdomen especially. On Thursday, I decided to go to school for half of the day. I felt a lot better, and I even took a shower on my own, although I moved slowly and kept the door of the bathroom open so my mom could hear me easily if I did call for help. All was well, and I felt pretty good, only slightly off-centre, kind of like after having about 3 drinks. I went to school and immediately was surrounded by my friends in the rather warm and loud cafeteria. I was very much frightened again about passing out, because it suddenly felt like the people around me were shaking slightly, and I got dizzy whenever I turned my head to look in a different direction. I went to lay down in the library, and I took a short nap which made me feel much, much better. My mind was still not working very well for the remainder of the day. I felt very slow and kind of tipsy. At about 3 PM, I started feeling like I was getting worse, and people seemed very odd from my perspective, and I almost felt like I was hallucinating everything around me. I'm not sure if some of it actually was hallucinations. I remember looking at a picture of someone skydiving, and I could close my eyes and feel like I was actually jumping out of the plane and quickly falling towards the ground. It was not a hallucination, but more like a very vivid dream. Yet again, I took another brief nap, and I actually felt as good as new once I woke up. Colours weren't as bright and odd-looking, and people were not quite as frightening and suspicious anymore. For the remainder of the day, I felt calm, happy, and more like what a nutmeg high should be like. I felt that way for a few hours, and once it got around dinner time, I started feeling withdrawal symptoms such as depression, sadness, and loneliness. The same withdrawal symptoms I have when I drink alcohol. Overall, nutmeg was definitely not worth it, and it should not be underestimated. It is very powerful, especially considering the fairly small amount that I took. Please, please just stay away from nutmeg. Not for me. A cannabis and nutmeg trip report by Day Tripper. Posted to earwood.org February 12th, 2016. I smoke weed regularly, and I've tried both acid and salvia, although both didn't really have a big effect on me. I didn't get any effect from salvia at all. So just suppose that psychedelics do not work properly on me for whatever reason. However, I'm always trying to broaden my mind with any drugs I can get my hands on, to see whether something will actually work someday. Since I had heard of the psychedelic effects of nutmeg from various sources, I was curious whether this would give me something. So one evening, after a few joints with friends, about 4 joints, but weed funnily enough affects me very strongly, I was really baked and alone in my apartment, and ended up thinking that taking the whole bag of nutmeg, which I actually had in my kitchen for cooking, might be a good idea. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, so I thought I would take the nutmeg, enjoy the trip for 1 or 2 hours, and then go to sleep. What a stupid stoned idea that was. The nutmeg was already grated, and there were 18 grams in the bag. I decided to do some research on the internet first, but couldn't find anything on the right dosage. I found a few threads where it said that you had to take a few ounces, so I decided to just chug down the whole bag. In retrospect, this was very irresponsible, and I will never do something like this again. But at the time, it sounded reasonable in my head. To cover up the bitter taste of the nutmeg, I mixed it with half a cup of soy milk. After taking the first gulp, I wanted to puke. However, I forced myself to drink the whole rest in one go, which was a good idea because with the soy milk, the bitterness only came as aftertaste. After some time, approximately 10 minutes, I felt like the weed high was getting stronger. I felt more relaxed and very lightheaded, but also my stomach hurt and I felt sick all the time. However, decided not to make myself throw up. Then, my vision became blurry and I got very, very sleepy. My eyes could not focus on anything. Every item in the room looked like it was sort of liquid, not in a fixed shape, but constantly changing shape slightly when I looked at it. I was starting to feel very disconnected from the world and my own body. I realised that I was starting to get paranoid, not scared of anything in particular, but just scared in general. It was starting to become a really unpleasant high. I tried to read a book, but it was impossible. So was watching TV. For some reason, I did not think of listening to music, but decided to go to bed instead. At least, that is all I remember. The next day, I woke up feeling like I had the worst hangover of all time. My stomach hurt like it was trying to kill me. Every time I was standing, I lost sight, like, when you get up too quickly and don't see anything for a few moments, feeling extremely dizzy. I tried to look up on the internet what the lethal dose of nutmeg was, and after finding that I had definitely not reached that, I got a bit more relaxed. I wrote to my friends on Facebook who I'd planned on meeting that day that I was not feeling well whatsoever. Writing was difficult, my eyes were still not focusing properly. Then, I made myself throw up, which really didn't help. I drank lots of water and ate something, but the stomach pain did not go away. Moreover, my head felt like my brain was just too big, pressing against my skull from the inside. My head also felt very hot, like I had a fever. Very, very unpleasant. I lay down in my bed with some tea and tried to sleep through the whole thing until I was feeling physically and mentally better. And then the real paranoia started. It was about 12 hours after I'd taken the nutmeg, and I'd read on the web that the trip could last up to 3 days. I was really tired all afternoon, constantly slipping in and out of sleep. When I was awake, my heart often started pounding like mad and random body parts started hurting, making me think that I was going to have a heart attack. I tried to mentally control my heartbeat to get it down to a lower pace, which luckily worked a little bit. I was just starting to accept that I was going to die. I was really not in a logical, responsible state of mind. I started imagining what my friends would do at my funeral and stuff. My chest and back hurt. My heart was beating way too fast. For some reason, I began focusing on my breathing, and I got so afraid that I would just stop breathing if I didn't constantly focus on it, that I actually just thought, in, out, in, out, in, out, for about a quarter of an hour. Or maybe it was just a few seconds, I don't actually know. Time didn't really run normally at this point. I tried desperately not to fall asleep, since I was sure that I was not going to wake up again if I did. After some time, I did fall asleep though, after I had assured myself, with the small rest of the logic I had left, that I had not taken enough nutmeg to die from it. For hours, I was constantly slipping in and out of sleep until I managed to sleep through for a little while. I woke up at about 7 in the evening feeling a bit better, meaning that my heart was not racing anymore and my mind felt a bit more in this world. I managed to keep myself from getting scared that I might not escape this state of mind anymore because I knew how paranoid I would get then. I met up with my friends, luckily I didn't have to leave the house, and smoked a joint with them, which helped a bit against the pain. The whole trip wasn't completely over, mind you, until about 3 days after, and even after 4 days, I still got a funny visual where I looked at the ground and the stones looked like they were all underwater. But I was at least able to enjoy that because I was not in pain anymore. Felt sick and dizzy for about 3 days after taking the stuff. Now, 1 week later, I'm still feeling a bit weird. I feel like I cut a few strings that connected me to this world and this reality. I'm constantly restless and I get emotional way easier than I did before. I also feel depressed at random times and without particular reason, which did happen to me before but not as frequently as this. I also find it slightly harder to focus on things with my thoughts. I am pretty sure, though, that I am gradually getting back to normal again. I don't think that I will ever take this stuff again, and if I do, only under supervision. Part of me regrets sleeping through most of the trip, but I do know that it would not have been pleasant if I had been awake. I also wish I could remember more of what I felt and saw while I was on it, but it is very hard because I was half sleeping most of the time. The whole thing just feels like a dream in my memory, like I dreamt for 3 whole days straight. Intense Gloom. A Nutmeg Trip Report by Rune. Posted to Irwood.org February 7th, 2007. I heard about nutmeg as a drug a few years back. I was sure it was just some kind of urban myth. After mentioning it to my friend, we looked at each other and said simultaneously, "Let's do it." It was about 3 PM. And with complete ignorance we bought a 25-gram packet of dried nutmeg between us and started eating it right outside the shopping centre, before realising this was not going to be possible without the aid of some kind of food or beverage. I remembered that they used nutmeg on custard tarts, so it was off to the bakery for us. Let me tell you something though, the tart tasted awful. Plan B involved taking a mouthful of nutmeg and a mouthful of Coke and swallowing, but it tasted so bad it was sort of funny. At least it was going down. It was doubly funny to see the look on my friend's face as he forced the stuff down his throat, while in the back of my mind I thought, this isn't even going to get you high, you sucker. I'm sure the same thought was in the back of his mind when it was my turn to splutter and swig. We decided we hadn't tortured ourselves enough and bought another 25-gram packet, which went down like a dream. Not. The immediate effects that I now put down to placebo. I mentioned I thought the road looked kind of wavy and my friend did too. It was probably caused by tears from eating the nutmeg. So that was our fun for the day. We headed home where we would typically dream up some more pointless activities in substitute for boredom. I think it was now about 6 to 7 PM. We were both in the living room. I was listening to music, while my friend read magazines. He started trying to convince me that the words looked really funny. I thought, what an idiot. Not realising that in about 10 minutes it would dawn on me that I'd been off my face for some time. We just really couldn't come to grips with the fact that the nutmeg had actually done its job. In fact, for the whole night, whenever I thought of it, I would say to myself, I don't believe it. The feeling is like being really, really stoned, but sort of lost at the same time, mixed with 1 cup of, I'm not sure I like this. I had promised my friend's brother we would go out night clubbing, although I was in no state to go. I decided not to let him down. I took a shower before we left. As I was about to get in the shower, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. At the time, I had dreadlocks, and this voice in my head was teasing me saying, "You hairy little animal." That sentence went over and over and over and over and over and over in my head as I showered. I shut my eyes and a new world opened up. I was in a hedge maze and there was no way out. This didn't scare me because I knew there really was a way out. Open your eyes. Since I had this control, I stayed in Maze World and walked around in the maze. I physically moved my feet like I was walking when I got to a corner. I physically turned 90 degrees and walked to the next corner. This was great fun, and the sensation of the water from the shower head hitting me from one side, then another, and the wet splashy carpet on the floor of the maze all added to an enjoyable disorientation. I still couldn't shut up the incessant hairy little animal voice though. Driving into the city was fun as well, and the G-forces from the car were intense. At the nightclub though, I was antisocial. My friend's brother and I stood in a circle of a group of people that he knew but I didn't. I couldn't pay attention to anything that was being said. Every 10 seconds, I would pass out and begin to fall over, but would regain consciousness before and straighten up again. This cycle continued for the whole time I was at the club. I worried that I would really pass out. No one knew I was on Nutmeg, even the friend's bro. There was no way they could understand. No way. I remember I developed this Inspector Go-Go Gadget hearing, where this satellite dish sort of opened up around my ear, and I could hear other conversations on the far side of the nightclub, even with the loud music. Phew. After a while though, I felt sick. I told people I was sick. I got the car keys and went out to line the car. I had to get out and throw up at one stage. Sausages from the barbecue dinner we had. Ugh. From this point on, the nutmeg was not enjoyable. The effects of marijuana by now would have long worn off, but this stuff was just as intense as ever and showed no signs of letting up. Back home now, and time for bed. I hit the sack and basically pass out immediately. I was living with the friend that I did the nutmeg with and we shared the same room. There was no conversation between us when I got home. He was in his own little world of too much fun and I was in mine. No words were necessary. I did notice he was far from smiling. In the morning, I woke up to the feeling of nutmeg completely unabated. Friend did too. He looked at me with a really sick face and said, quote, "This is fucked." We had decided that we had done something very wrong, and the feeling was not going to end. The nightclub pass-out feeling was the order of the day for me. A repetitive waking up and wondering where I was. It's a bit like when you're young and you go on a theme park ride. It's fantastic, but then you reach this point of, oh, can you stop the ride now, please? No, really, I've had enough, I'm serious, please, just stop it. Then you throw up, but the ride keeps on going and going and going. By that night, we were both glad to be coming down, although it wasn't until the next day that we were totally back to clowning around like a couple of morons. The nutmeg experience seemed to involve many themes repeating over and over, and generally, lots of repetition. It would have been better if we knew what to expect and more comforting to know that it wasn't going to last forever. Thinking that was actually quite scary. You should respect nutmeg, and try to plan how much you have if you do decide on doing it, even though I don't recommend it, and what you were going to do with your time on it. We were really too young in the head to do this drug. I'll get a lot more out of it now with a bit more life behind me. It is not a recreational drug. You shouldn't do it purely for the high, but to experience from a higher level. Nutmegged for 30 hours. A Nutmeg Trip Report by Nutmegger, posted to earwid.org April 14th, 2006. The only drugs I'd done till now were alcohol and weed, about 5 times over the past 6 months, and more recently DXM, very low dosage, a single bottle of Vicks 44. Except for my first weed trip last year, all the others gave me only an enjoyable body buzz. On my first weed trip, I freaked out with severe paranoia and guilt. I'd tried nutmeg 2 times before, once taking in excess of 5 tablespoons gradually over 5 to 6 hours, without feeling anything more than a body buzz and a very heavy head the next day. On a fine Thursday evening, with nothing much to do, and after reading a couple more nutmeg trip reports on Irwin, I went to a local organic food store and grabbed a small nutmeg shaker, a West Indian variety. Since I had read somewhere that taking nutmeg with milk or milkshake reduces the effects, I decided to swallow 4 teaspoons straight down with water. The setting was in my apartment, which I share with 2 sober guys. I had some psychedelic screensavers and tracks ready on my computer, and was eager to try out a new racing game I'd recently acquired. On every trip, my major concern has been hiding the fact that I'm stoned from these people. This time, I decided I would retire to my room after an early dinner, to avoid any paranoia that may arise out of this, as it has earlier. So, this is how my trip went. Times are accurate up to 15 minutes. 8:30 PM. Gag down 3 heaped teaspoons of nutmeg with water. Have a reasonably heavy dinner. 9:30 PM, tea plus 1 hour. Feel nothing coming on, and ingest another teaspoon of nutmeg. 11:30 PM, tea plus 3 hours. Playing Test Drive 5, chatting on the internet, listening to music, reading more nutmeg reports, waiting for the trip to come on. Drinking a lot of water to counter the dry mouth and prevent dehydration. 12:15 AM, tea plus 3:45. Talked with a few friends on the phone, still nothing though, except for a slightly heavy head. Decided to turn in for the night. Disappointed, but happily sleepy. I'm an insomniac. Approximately 2:30 to 6:30 AM, tea plus 6 hours to tea plus 10 hours. Wake up with a start, have to go pee. Feel a sudden head rush coming on as I take a leak. Stagger back to my room, trying to stay very, very quiet so my roommates don't wake up. I know I'm completely stoned. Very similar to the first weed trip I freaked out on. Mind working on overdrive, random thoughts which I can't control. After my first weed trip, which I went on with an experienced friend, he told me that I freaked out that time because I was trying to control my trip. This time, I tried to let go and enjoy it. This is what I took nutmeg for, damn it. I let myself into it, now I've got to enjoy it. I attach headphones to my PC and extend them with some difficulty to my bed, so I can listen to the music lying down. I also put on some visualization I like. I'm beginning to enjoy the music by now, and I'm mesmerised by the beautiful, beautiful patterns that move in sync with my music. I can almost float with the music when I close my eyes. Getting good closed-eye visuals, similar to those I freaked out on seeing on my weed trip. By and by, I start getting tired of the music. Moreover, I keep getting the feeling that my body is out of water, which is why I cannot metabolize the nutmeg properly, and it's why I'm having a slow, long-stretched trip. I keep drinking more and more water, then I get an uncomfortable feeling that my bladder's full, but I can't notice it because I'm numb. So I get up to take a leak once again. I must have trudged to the bathroom about 8 to 10 times. The worst part about this all is that I can't fall asleep. I keep telling myself to turn off the music and try falling asleep, but then I'm afraid I'll stop breathing if I do, and after a few seconds of sleep, I'm fully awake again. Finally, I decide I'm bored of the music, and decide to see a light-hearted movie to lift my spirits. I put Shrek on my computer, and settle down into a happy, half-awake state watching the movie. About halfway through the movie, a most unfortunate thing happens. The video freezes, but the sound keeps playing. After some time, the video started. My computer's unstable, but was out of sync with the sound. This freaked me out completely. I mean, completely. On one plane, I realised that there was nothing wrong with me. All I needed to do was restart the movie, but feelings of paranoia crept in. I started thinking I had messed up my brain, and I was receiving sound signals out of sync with my visual signals. With nobody to talk to, I couldn't confirm my doubts, but I was sure that my brain was messed up. I then took to making random noises, playing with my clock, squeaking my bed, to make sure I was receiving sound and visual signals correctly. This is when I was trapped in a terrible thought loop. I think it was about arguing with myself that I was completely fucked up. I kept telling myself if I was completely fucked up, I wouldn't realise I was, so I wasn't, and so on. Finally, I sat awake in bed and realised I had to do something about it. I got up to pee yet again, and then I realised I was talking to myself in the bathroom, and on the way back. My roommate hinted at this the next day. 6:30 AM, T plus 10 hours. Finally, I sit at my computer and realise this is going on way too long. Even my bad trip on weed hadn't lasted this long. I read up more trip reports on a website and convince myself that nutmeg trips usually last longer, and I guess I'm fine. This is normal. 7:30 AM, T plus 11 hours. Bored of reading news and answering mails. Wonder whether to skip school. Nothing important to do, and safer to stay home. I'm getting really tired of the trip now though. I do want it to end. Though, as high as a kite, I decide to try and sleep the rest of the trip off, if that's even possible. This is where the felines, read the term somewhere online, and no other word could describe it anyway, kicked in. I was trying to go to sleep when for some reason I started thinking 3 words over and over again. Sound, eyes, echo, perhaps a remnant of a mind loop. Eventually, the sounds became more and more rhythmic, until I realised it coincided with my heartbeat. From then on, every slight move I made, the words jumped at me. If I decided to sigh, the words would come louder. An arm movement or blink of an eye would be a volley of these words repeated over and over again. It became so unbearable that I tried to stay as still as possible. I wished I couldn't feel my heartbeat, but then I'd die. This made me breathe deeper, and from then on, I heard the words echo with every breath. 10:30 AM, T plus 14 hours. I wake up thinking I've finally slept off my trip, but it was not to be. What I'd thought was a heavy head was actually the same heavy body buzz. I go to the bathroom yet again, and notice that my roommates have left for the day. I decide to watch some TV, but find it especially boring. Now I'm getting really tense about the trip. Have I damaged my brain completely? When is this thing going to be over? I have a couple of get-togethers lined up for Friday evening, but I'm sure I'll be fine in another 2 to 3 hours, I hope. I remember how my experienced friend told me that alcohol helps getting down from a weed trip and helped him go to sleep. I decide to finish off the handy 1.5 pint bottle of vodka I have. I'll gulp down the vodka raw with water and feel nauseatic for a few minutes. Realise for the first time during the trip that my short-term memory has taken a holiday. I find myself walking back and forth between the kitchen and my room before I realise it and stop. I watch more TV and try to sleep on the couch, yet sleep still evades me. I listen to some more music, but I just cannot force myself to watch Shrek. I'm afraid of the mind loop getting hold of me again. I go out to smoke a cigarette and look at the people below hurrying to work or school. I remember feeling jealous of them. They have sharp minds capable of so much, while I am in my own fucked up little nutmeg world. I can feel the depression coming up. I just want this trip to stop. I want to work hard like all these other people, and I'm wasting my life away on nutmeg. What a loser I am. 12:30 PM to 2:30 PM. T plus 16 hours to T plus 18 hours. Now I'm really freaking out. My trip should have been over several hours back. What the hell is actually happening to me? How on earth am I going to face all the people I have to meet in the evening? They're all sober beyond an occasional drink or two, and I wouldn't for my life want them to know what I just did. I feel disgusted with myself. I honestly wonder if I'm going to even survive this shit at all. I read about nutmeg OD causing liver failure and death. I briefly considered dialing 911 after this thought. Maybe it would be a better idea to go to hospital with a chance to survive than die. I gradually overcome the panic attack, thank God, and promise myself over and over again that if I survive this experience, I'm going sober for good. I value my mind and body too much for this shit. Even decide to give up smoking and drinking to make up for the damage I've caused to my body. 2:30 PM to 6:30 PM. T plus 18 hours to T plus 22. I decide to call my experienced friend, although he's at work, but after hearing me blabber on the phone, he promises to drop in on the way home. Friend drops in, and we talk a while. I'm starting to feel somewhat positive now. My friend convinces me that a bad trip was part of trying out a new substance, and I had to take it in my stride. I convince him to hang out at my place for some more time while I get control over myself. We watch TV a while, and then walk over to his place, since he wants to smoke a joint. By now, I've resigned my fate, and decided I'll have to go through the rest of the evening in my present fucked up state. 6:30pm to 10:30pm, T plus 22 hours to T plus 26. The rest of the evening went by without a hitch. I honestly feel quite confident now that I managed to portray a pretty sober, confident picture of me in front of my guests, completely opposite of my fucked up state of mind. I made it a point to drink a couple of beers and some strong cocktails to help me sleep through the night. I was still feeling as bad as I was in the afternoon, but the alcohol had helped me a little bit. I was used to the alcohol kick, and it was much, much easier to control. Finally, I managed to go to sleep at about 11:30pm, vowing never to do Nutmeg again, and positive I would be fine when I woke up, which I was, except for a slight alcohol hangover. Man, oh man, that was one hell of a trip, and one hell of a long post. Sorry, but I just had to get it all out. I've gained a new respect for my body and mind now after all of this, and I really do hope that I value them more from now on.
Over-the-Counter Visions, a Nutmeg Trip Report by a Crash Test Junkie from Irwin, published April 23rd, 2006. My friend, Kappa, not his real name, and I had heard about the psychoactive properties of nutmeg for some time, but had never fully understood what people were talking about until we tried whole cloves. Before that, we had done the ground powder, about 4 tablespoons apiece, once or twice, and found it to be a mildly interesting buzz, but nothing we would comfortably call psychedelic, or even really worth the trouble. After more reading, Kappa got the idea to chew down whole cloves, and did a couple the weekend before, finding them to produce a stronger buzz than the powdered stuff. He said that the day after eating them, he had a buzz that lasted all the way into the evening, a warm and relaxing glow all through his body. With my interest piqued, we decided to set Saturday night aside and eat 5 cloves apiece and write and record all that happened. We went to the local natural food store and picked up a jar of unground Ethiopian nutmeg with about 12 or 14 whole cloves in it for about $6 and some vanilla ice cream to wash them down. Whole cloves taste incredibly nasty, way worse than when they are all ground and dry, and ice cream turns out to be a good antidote to wash them down with. We were all set for the great experiment. With my folks out of town for the weekend, we had the whole house for a couple of days. It turns out we would need every hour of those 2 days. We chewed 3 cloves apiece right after dinner, thinking it would probably be best to eat them not on an empty stomach. We had read that some people had died eating more than 2 cloves of nutmeg, but I figured if it was that dangerous, they would say something on the jar. Still, we exercised a little caution and didn't take the whole dose all at once. A couple hours later and we felt nothing physically, positive or negative, and capped off the dose with 2 more apiece. We hung around, watching TV and smoked a bowl, as Kappa explained to me the complicated absorption process of myrcene, the psychoactive in nutmeg. Apparently it is absorbed in the later part of the digestive process, so it can be 4 to 8 hours before effects are felt. Weary from waiting and feeling like I wasted $6, I drifted off to sleep. I woke up with a start in the middle of the night, and immediately a big grin came over my face. This was more like it. My body tingled. A warm, thick buzz radiated from the base of my skull, and everywhere I looked, the natural sort of distortions of my vision were exaggerated, with red and blue dots flying all over the place, hovering around everything I focused on. When I closed my eyes, pictures would race in and disappear, often accompanied by fleeting sounds. A yellow bus with writing on its side, an old horse with a body the texture of stone, only blue, wearing bells beneath a starry sky while a horn honked, and I could peripherally hear my name being whispered. I remember feeling like the rapidity and vivid nature of the visions should have freaked me out a little, as often they would on acid or less frequently on shrooms. But the deep state of relaxation and sedation that my body was in made any kind of anxiety impossible. I was in a perfect hypnagogic state, hanging somewhere between reality and unconsciousness, watching the tireless subconscious play out in my visual cortex. It was wonderful and, frankly, a total surprise. I'd ingested a spice, for crying out loud. I couldn't believe the strength and the vivid nature of the visions whatsoever. I had experienced plenty of crazy sights on acid, and this stuff was absolutely of the same calibre but far less frightening, even somewhat soothing in a way. It had been about 10 hours since we ingested the cloves. I grabbed my tape recorder and turned it on, and got up to see where my buddy was. I found him sitting on the couch, staring at the wall. We both looked at each other with wide, giddy eyes and nodded. Nutmeg. At some point in the pre-dawn hours, I experienced the most vivid hallucination experience I have ever had on anything before or since. And this is no small statement, as I have done LSD, mushrooms, speed. I stayed up for 5 days on speed till I hallucinated and heard things talking, as well as plenty of other stuff, but nothing will ever compare to this hallucination. Kappa and I were sitting on the couch staring at the white wall, watching all sorts of abstractions come and go, and describing them to each other, when a massive, gentle face coalesced from the twittering red and blue and green shapes. It was dynamic, vibrating with energy, and it appeared to float proud of the wall by a foot or so, gazing right back at us with a sweet, angelic expression. I said, "Cap, do you see that? Do you see that, man?" He replied, "My God, totally, look at its smile." I said, "You see that floating face there?" And he was like, "Yeah, I do, look, it's coming towards us." My heart raced as the thing expanded till it was about 10 feet high, and began to slowly float through the room towards us. We kept up the banter between us as it approached, and I could hear the radio in the kitchen playing a violin piece that seemed to be climaxing along with the vision. "I can almost touch it," I wanted to yell with exultation, but I was speaking in a loud whisper, reaching my hand out to the face. "Don't pop it," Kappa said, and I dropped my hand instantly saddened by the suggestion. The music from the kitchen reached a frenetic crescendo, and the face broke up into an orgasm of teeming coloured bubbles, like billions of particles swarming out into entropy. And I heard my friend go, "Woo!" as the little dots dispersed. I looked over at him and the couch next to me was empty. I was sitting all alone in my living room. My heart felt like it dropped down to my feet and bounced back up into my ears, and I called out to my buddy. He answered, but from the basement below me. The impossibility of sharing a vision did not even occur to me at the time. I'd been so wrapped up in the dreamy nature of what I was experiencing that my disbelief of it did not have time to form. Nutmeg is a powerful hallucinogen, but also a powerful sedative, and there was a real sort of narcotic undercurrent of apathetic bliss to the whole trip. Only when I recognised that I had been talking to myself did I try to analyse the situation clearly, and even then it was impossible. The tape recorder was running the whole time, and only caught us talking a couple of times. Even when I was on the couch thinking I was talking to Kappa, I was sitting in silence. The only thing I said was something I thought he said. "Woo!" Now, I've done a lot of stuff, and I should definitely mention that I am more sensitive to psychedelics than most people I know. I get the visual stuff pretty easily for some reason. I also know that the power of suggestion is strong, and many people have told me that I wanted to trip so bad, that that's why it was so intense. Whatever. I know that that was the most powerful and coercive and incredible hallucination I've ever had, and it was off the spice rack at the grocery store. I'll end this trip report with some cautionary advice. The next day after our trip, we slept for about 16 hours, and shit real dark and black. After the next couple trips we took, the post-trip knockouts got really long, going to like 20 hours, with us waking up feeling very hungover and nauseous every time. I think the toxic properties of the nutmeg were wearing us down, so we stopped doing it. The most Kappa ever did at one time was 8 cloves, but that seems pretty crazy to me, even though he loved it.
The Singing Air Conditioner, a Nutmeg and DXM trip report by Spirit Earth, posted to shroomery.org 6 years and 5 months ago. Let me start out by saying that nutmeg is nuts. It can turn you into a nut. This is not something that should be messed with without caution. You could easily end up in a bad trip and feel like you have the flu for up to 24 hours. It's not hard to end up taking too much. So if you are going to do it, start out with a small dose the first time, and build from there. I started by taking 3 tablespoons of some ancient pre-ground nutmeg powder found in the kitchen cabinet. At 8 PM, after finishing the dose, I drank a dose of alcohol in the form of 4 Loco, 4 shots or beers worth I guesstimate, followed by another small beer. I drank them slowly and was feeling pretty good, a nice buzz and that amazing feeling that alcohol gives. So I'm playing guitar, enjoying the alcohol buzz, waiting for any effects from the nut powder, when I decided to go and get more booze. I'm riding my bike to the store, having an amazing time en route, but when I get to the store, it is past 3 AM, so I cannot get any more booze since this is the store policy. So I decide I'm going to buy a vanilla and orange extract to keep the alcohol buzz going. Kind of lame, but it does the trick, almost as strong as vodka or rum. Well, right there, next to the extracts, is organic pre-ground nutmeg. It's been over 5 hours since the first nutmeg dose was taken, and I was feeling very minor effects, so I decided to get the nutmeg at the store. I also picked up some DXM at 300 milligrams to combine with the nutmeg and alcohol. I could not wait to witness the beauty that was coming. It must be amazing when it kicks in. So I dosed the 300 milligrams of DXM while at the store. Now I get back home and dose the nutmeg. The other batch was old and had been sitting in the cabinet for who knows how long and must have been low in potency. I'm feeling effects, but only very minor. So this is when I decide to dose another 4 tablespoons, but this time of the organic brand new nut powder that I just got. I just sat there feeling funny. I had to just sit there and chill, relax, because the DXM was coming up, and I felt sick. You know that feeling from DXM that feels like you just ate a whole bottle of cough medicine gel caps. Not too bad, but it was kind of intense, so I just sat and chilled. Don't believe it when people say you can't trip on the pre-ground you buy at the store. If it isn't old and you just bought it, then you may trip. I sure did. Mine was organic, and organic nutmeg was the only ingredient. So now I take a shot of the vanilla extract, feeling very nice and buzzing and feeling excellent really. I just sat there playing guitar for like an hour, having a blast. I felt like some singer from the 70s or 80s. The sun began to rise. It is early morning. I'm still on DXM and begin to feel the nutmeg's effects, but just starting to come up, not near peak or full effects at all. Pretty much just chilled back and meditated for a while. Played more guitar while finishing the last of the extracts, really nice buzz again coming up. The nutmeg and DXM combo felt very strange. I then started to feel sick, like in my body. Nothing seemed real. Stuff started to get intense now. My body began to feel slightly sweaty and shaky, but very mild, nothing severe. I had to use my experience of high doses of DXM in the past and how to calm down when it's getting intense. I could have freaked out, but all I had to do was calm down and relax. I had to confront and face the parts of myself that I needed to work on, or things that I wasn't conscious of before that were affecting my life negatively, that were seen more clearly during this state. There is a sense of delirium with this substance, like DPH in a way, kind of disturbing, like madness. At the beginning of the trip, I actually felt low rather than high. Like I was low because I was being weighed down, like my body was a giant nut weighing several tons. The body load. Well, if you've tripped on Hawaiian baby woodrose seeds, you know exactly how this feels. I had become a nut. I lay on my back, feeling like a giant nutmeg nut. So heavy, this nostalgic LSA body feel. I had gone nuts. The body load was heavy and intense, it was awful. Very unpleasant, and though similar to the LSA body load, this had a sick feeling to it. It felt as if I took a toxic substance that has made me feel sick, but nothing too bad. It just felt unpleasant, and my mouth was as dry as a desert, and eyes as if I smoked a fat blunt. To be honest, by now I just wanted it to be over, but I had to ride it out. I could feel the taste and feeling of the nutmeg nut in my mouth and digesting in my stomach and body, like the spirit of the nutmeg nut itself. The body load by now was awful, but once that dissipated, it actually felt rather nice. Sensations of relaxation and euphoria similar to cannabis had covered my body like a blanket. Everything was moving slightly, and my arms looked weird, like a painting, or actually my arms kind of looked like flowing water. My air conditioner was extremely loud, and it seemed I could hear the very detail of every sound the fan or air conditioner was producing. It sounded really strange and kind of like water as well. It's like I was tapping into the detail of sound, or was picking up different sounds I couldn't hear before or wasn't aware of. Like the air conditioner was making so many very pronounced and just sounds like water or air. So, a talented and gifted singer passed away at the time of my trip, and I found this out while I was tripping. I was watching YouTube videos all night in memory of the famous singer, like his interviews and stuff. He's got a lot of positive, encouraging messages, and is like a wise teacher in his interviews, to be honest. Quite interesting. Well, now it had been over 12 hours since I started tripping at this point, and though the body load was gone, I was still tripping and high. Actually, I can't believe how similar this felt to bud, like a firecracker weed edible. I was still on YouTube with headphones in when I heard what sounded like voices or people talking out in the yard. But the air conditioner was so loud too. Like not annoying, like really loud, but it was so pronounced, like the details of the many different sounds the fan was making. I heard the voices a couple more times, but I'm not sure if it was actually people talking in my yard, or auditory hallucinations. Perhaps my brother might have friends over, or maybe it was the neighbours. This singer was so inspiring in his interviews on YouTube while I was still tripping, seeing my walls moving and all that. I couldn't quite believe it. It's like a cannabis high, but lasting up to 24 hours. And I guess I can't really complain with that. Very interesting indeed. My room looks like a painting or a work of art. It'd been over 24 hours since I'd slept, and this added to the delirium DPH feel to the trip. I'd stayed up for 33 hours just about at this point. So yeah, everything is still moving and breathing now, and people's faces looked all trippy and weird. Like on DXM, people's faces looked trippy as shit. Well anyway, I'm still watching YouTube videos with headphones on, and I start to hear really weird noises and sounds in my air conditioner. I pause the YouTube video to examine it. I guess it's just auditory hallucinations. Like just mysterious, odd, strange-like sounds and noises. Hard to describe, but sounds like wind and sounds like underwater voices. I kind of hear voices, but they sound underwater and alien. It all seems to be blended in with the sounds of my fan and air conditioner that keeps me cool in the summer. It's really cool, to be honest. The air conditioner was just making sounds. I could hear the detail of the sound. It was making many different sounds, and they weren't loud, but just pronounced, and I don't know. In the sound of my air conditioner, along with the sounds like dripping and underwater sounds, there was these air and wind sounds, just strange sounds in general, and even voices, but like I said, as if they were coming from underwater. It sounded to me like the air conditioner was breathing, but one long, continuous, never-ending breath instead of in and out. It was freaky and weird, and at first I kept saying to myself like, this is weird, I don't think I actually like this. But then I just kept on watching YouTube videos, still hearing weird sounds in the background. And I also saw static, or these movements in the corner of my eye, like blobs of colour. An interesting experience all around, was awful at first and wouldn't want to repeat that part of the trip again. After the body load went away, it wasn't too bad though. Very relaxing, very trippy and colourful. I still can't believe how similar this was to a cannabis edible high, like a firecracker, but lasting hours and hours upon end. I had the munchies as well, and a cotton mouth and bloodshot eyes, the classics, as well as dehydration. The fruit I ate was too good. It helped the dry mouth massively. So I would say it was an interesting experience, and other than the first part of the trip with the heavy body load and sick feeling in the body, I guess it was worth it. I enjoyed the trip following the body load. If you're going to do it, I'd recommend starting with a really low dose and not redosing if it doesn't work. But wait and try a higher dose like a week later until you hit the right spot. Now, I would never recommend mixing drugs without experience or caution, and don't actually advise doing this at all. But if you are going to do it, just be careful. Transdream Scenery and Going Through Hell. A Nutmeg Trip Report by Jack McQuaid. Posted to earwid.org June 10th, 2016. I was a junior in college when a cool guy came to visit us one weekend. He inquired if we had any dope, but we didn't. So he suggested we go get some at the grocery store. 3 of us went there with him and came back with 3 containers of ground mace. He explained that this substance is prepared from the ureus that grows around the outside of a nutmeg seed, and assured us it is a powerful psychedelic. Back in our dorm, each of us took about 2 heaping teaspoons of the stuff with perhaps 6 ounces of water. Nothing actually happened to me at first, but after half an hour, I started to feel a bit dizzy. It occurred to me it would be nice to have some music to accompany the anticipated trip. I didn't have any music equipment, so I locked myself in the room with another friend who had a record player and was away for the weekend, and I started up some of his Spanish-American music. Lying on his bed, my trip started off with abstractions moving across my occipitals. These technicolor patterns move with the highly rhythmic Mexican music, stimulating me to respond with rhythmic movements of my own as I lay prone on the bed. At some point, these gyrations got me sexually aroused, and I consummated that state with a handjob. As this approached culmination, my occipitals responded, reflecting what my body was doing, and then the imagery broke off to nothingness as I relaxed. Instead of eventually returning to consciousness, a trance-like state ensued, in which I was no longer observing the trip from my usual perspective, but instead was immersed in a dream. This was not like a lucid dream at all though. It was like being the character I was dreaming about, starting out as an infant. I gradually developed into a toddler, without having any reflective thoughts about who I was or where I was. Up to this point, the trance had lasted 4 or 5 hours, objective time, though my subjective dream time seemed infinitely longer. Then, as my dream perspective reached the age when personal memories had begun to form in my actual childhood, at about age 3 or 4, it occurred to me in the trance that I recognised my surroundings. In fact, the trance-dream scenery was the interior of the house I'd lived in when I was that age. This broke the continuity of the experience, and from that point on, for perhaps another hour, I dreamed an increasingly speeding up montage of short sequences, capturing scenes from my childhood and teenage years, up to my actual age,
which was 20 at the time. Once back in real life perspective, I got up and walked around for a while. I went to the hall bathroom and vomited, and then lay down again, feeling awful. My body seemed to dry out like a desert. Eventually, it was like I was a sandman with strands of glass running through me, replacing the physiology of my whole nervous system. I began to jerk and twitch, but luckily, my friend Roy came to my rescue. He gave me artificial respiration, staying with me for at least an hour. Even so, it was like going through hell. Eventually, possibly thanks to Roy, I survived, never to take mace again. I think the down part of the trip took almost as long as the up part. All told, it was about 12 hours. But the experience taught me that Alexander Shulgin's well-known quote is true. I understood that our entire universe is contained in the mind and the spirit. We may choose not to find access to it, we may even deny its existence, but it is indeed there inside of us, and there are chemicals that can catalyse its availability. When limited to one's personal perspective, that entire universe is that person's entire life experience. This trip retrieved the initial part of my life that happened before I could remember anything, and also many scenes after that, which I could remember and recognise as the trance state proceeded past toddlerdom. All of that came rolling across my occipitals. Did anything like my experience happen to my two friends who took a similar amount of mace? Nah, they just got buzzy and eventually slept it off.